Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you for being here this evening and for giving me this opportunity to speak with you. Tonight, we will take a look at our district's current K-6 literacy practices and look forward at ways that we can improve the quality of our curriculum, instruction, and professional development. We'll begin by looking at our 2017 demographic data. This information will help to define our current reality and assess where we need to go from here. Our district is already doing so many things well. We will define those areas of success and take a look at ways that we can increase student achievement and literacy. All the work that we do is rooted within our district's equity vision. We will take a moment to ground ourselves in that work as we move forward with a new literacy plan. Tonight, I will discuss best practices in curriculum design that develop and deepen student understanding and ways in which we can utilize practical and impactful professional development. Finally, I will deliver the actionable steps that our district can take to ensure a full implementation of the Common Core Standards in Literacy that uses best practices in curriculum instruction and PD. Let's begin by looking at our current reality and our district demographics. This data is from the 2016-17 school year. You can see that we had over 7,000 students enrolled, and of those students, 45% of those students were white, with the remaining students of color. It's interesting to note how our district's demographics have changed over the years. Look back to the 1999-2000 school year where 81.9% of our students were white. And then if you look at the 2009-2010 data, when our district last implemented our literacy curriculum, 62.9% of our students were white. Compare that now to last year's data where only 44.6% of our enrolled students are white. It's clear that our district demographics have changed significantly from our last implementation. Here's some updated 2018 data that speaks again to those changing demographics. This data includes 5 years of trend data, as well as some data from 10 and then 15 years ago. You can see that the free and reduced price lunch was stabilized and has stabilized over the last 5 years. As have the last 5 years, our English learners have also stabilized and even actually decreased from a few years back. We can continue to increase our percentage of students of color. Interestingly, over time, our data is actually becoming less comparable to that of state averages. Next, you will see the MCA reading proficiency scores from 2017. Again, with MCA scores, the tested grades are grades 3 through 8 and then grade 10. You can see that reading shows a slight increase from the previous year, only a 1% increase, while the state remained even. Overall, reading scores for Roseville students showed a slight increase from the previous year, while statewide scores remained unchanged. Grades 3, 6, 7, and 8 increased scores from the previous year, and actually grade 6 outperformed the statewide proficiency. You can see Asian, multiracial, and white students all showed increases in their scores, but look at the achievement gap. Our achievement gap increased over the last 3 years because our white students' proficiency increased. Though we've made gains in proficiency, there is still much work to be done in decreasing the achievement gap, especially for our Black students. Another current reality is the Reading Well by 3rd grade initiative. This early reading proficiency is a developmental milestone in a child's educational experience. And Minnesota has identified the end of grade 3 as an expectation for proficient beginning reading for all students. That means providing quality curriculum, instruction, assessments, and interventions is the foundation for developing a comprehensive system of support for all learners. Reading Well by Third Grade is a statewide initiative administered by the Minnesota Department of Ed. Minnesota Statute 120B12 requires school districts to adopt a local literacy plan to have every child reading by the end of third grade. It states a local literacy plan must include processes to assess students' level of reading proficiency and progress, notify and involve parents, intervene with students who are not reading at or above grade level, and to provide staff with appropriate professional development. Roseville teachers work with students and families to provide just right teaching for every student, and our local literacy plan must address state requirements and provide a general overview of our district practices that relate to reading well by third grade. This plan ensures that all students have a solid foundation of literacy skills and are college and career ready when they graduate. Roseville Area Schools is a diverse learning community with students, families, and staff who represent a variety of nationalities, ethnicities, languages, cultures, religions, abilities, learning styles, and other attributes. This district is committed to being a learning community that's characterized by engaged, motivated, and high-achieving learners, a nurturing and challenging environment for each student and staff member, clear goals, high expectations, and measurable results, professionals who apply current best educational practices in instruction, curriculum, and assessment, and meaningful community involvement. With an overarching commitment to equity and success for all students, we aim to close the achievement gap within our diverse student population. Roseville's commitment to equity and quality education is reinforced by our equity vision, which states quality teaching and learning for all, equity in all we do. This is at the forefront of everything we do, and we must ground ourselves in this vision as we move forward in this work. Best practices in curriculum design direct us to develop and deepen student understanding, according to Tomlinson and McTeague. Our curriculum design plan is guided by the Understanding by Design, or the UBD model. UBD is a way of thinking which emphasizes how we teach, and it centers around student learning and understanding. Best practices in curriculum design begin actually with the end in mind. The first stage of the UBD process begins by asking the question, what do we want students to be able to know and do? We must first unpack content standards and uncover big ideas and enduring understandings. This helps teachers understand the depth of their curriculum. Looking deeper into content standards can also help determine what types of assessments to use. Examining goals and identifying essential questions provides clarity for both the teacher and students. Roseville asks teachers to post daily learning targets in the form of I can statements that are written in kid-friendly language, as well as post state content standards. This is already standard practice in our district at many schools. It is important to note that when our curriculum focuses on big ideas and essential questions, it signals to both students and parents that our underlying goal is to improve student learning, according to Tomlinson and McTeague. The next step in the UBD method is to think like an assessor before developing the instructional plan and ask, how will we know that students have learned what we want them to know? This is an important next step in determining evidence of student learning. When making this determination, it's important to consider performance indicators, of course, the content standards and learning goals. Assessments should be aligned very specifically with power standards in order to see how each standard fits into the larger context of learning. Once teachers have considered the overarching learning goals, they then create summative assessments that match those goals. Formative assessments can provide insight into how students are doing on a particular standard, and then teachers gradually work up to a summative assessment. By the time a unit of study is complete, teachers should have a very clear picture of the learning for each student. Best practices in assessment development allow opportunities for students to engage, to explain, interpret, apply, shift perspective, display empathy, and reflectively self-assess, according to Tomlinson and McTeague. Responsiveness in assessments is also important. This means giving choices and allowing students to show what they know in a variety of ways, yet never losing sight of the overarching goals and standards. This directly aligns with Roseville's equity vision and commitment to providing quality teaching and learning for all. Examples of classroom assessments might include written or oral responses, maybe an artistic representation, a how-to demonstration of content, or maybe even a reflective journal. The use of pre-assessments is also really important in being responsive to student learning. Pre-assessments provide teachers with critical knowledge of what students already know, and they help pinpoint gaps in knowledge and understanding. They enable teachers to form instructional groupings that challenge students that are ready for more, or reteach confusing concepts to struggling students. Formative assessments should also take place throughout a unit of study. These are like a litmus test of student understanding because they provide evidence of learning within a unit. They allow teachers insight on how students will actually perform on the summative test, and they're a powerful tool for differentiating curriculum and guiding decision making. Creating assessments that provide evidence of student learning and are responsive to individual needs will deepen student understanding and help sharpen and focus our teaching. Effective curriculum design ends with creating the learning plan. This final stage in the UBD process considers what instructional strategies and learning materials a teacher will use to deliver content. It is only after a teacher has considered enduring understandings and learning goals and created assessments aligned to those goals that they now focus on their instructional plan. The learning plan addresses the way in which students will learn the enduring understandings and how they'll show mastery of content. Too often, teachers begin at this stage and they end up primarily using activity-oriented instruction, or they overcover instructional materials. This is not best practice in curriculum design. Instructional strategies should be engaging and effective and incorporate a variety of methodologies, always keeping in mind the learning goals and the evidence of mastery. They have to take into account student readiness, learning style and preferences, student schema and background knowledge, and even student interests. Teachers must also be responsive to student needs and ensure that students have equitable access to essential knowledge and enduring understandings. Learner differences should be regarded as valuable and important to learning. This directly aligns with our district's equity vision, quality teaching and learning for all, equity in all we do. With this as the cornerstone of our educational philosophy, we must also acknowledge the existence of inequity in curriculum and the impact of power and privilege in creating injustices in both curriculum and instruction. You know, our district has already done a lot of work to interrupt some of these inequities, yet we must continually strive to create culturally relevant lessons for students and unveil absent narratives within the curriculum we teach. In order to create a curriculum development plan that aligns with best practices, we must include these 3 design principles. Set the learning targets, determine the assessments, and then create the learning plan. Roseville Area Schools is tenacious in its commitment to quality teaching and learning for all, equity in all we do. Student success is of the utmost priority, and this district is committed to utilizing instructional best practices in the curriculum design process. Robert Marzano's work in The New Art and Science of Teaching provides us with an excellent framework for substantive change. He asserts that in order for students to learn effectively, they must 1. Receive feedback, 2. Receive meaningful content instruction, and 3. Have their basic physiological needs met in the context of learning. To enhance student learning, there are 3 major categories of teaching that have been identified: feedback, content, and context. As our district moves forward in the curriculum design process for literacy, we have identified 3 design areas that we believe will have the greatest impact on student achievement. We've selected 1 design area from each of the 3 categories of teaching. The first design area that we will focus on is under the category of feedback. It is important to provide clear learning goals and communicate those learning goals to students. As I mentioned before, a standard practice in some Roseville schools is for teachers to communicate clear learning targets to their students in the form of I can statements. Yet more is needed in helping students understand the importance of these goals and the development of that knowledge. Because when educators communicate learning targets, they need to include learning intentions and success criteria. These components give students a sense of the purpose of learning, as well as a sense of what it means to be successful. So we begin by asking, how will I communicate clear learning goals that help students understand the progression of the knowledge that they're expected to master and where they are along that progression? That's from Marzano. Clear learning targets and rubrics help level the learning field for all kids, because those who might be lower on the learning continuum can see where they are headed. And using student data can also help us target specific strategies needed to help them move forward. 3 elements are important to providing clear learning goals. The first is to utilize and provide scales and rubrics. Rubrics are more specific and they're utilized independently by teachers in their individual classrooms, while scales are more general and describe the progression of learning. The focus here is on the use of proficiency scales to articulate what students should know or do and provide guidance for what proficiency might look like at different levels. So a score of 3.0 would indicate proficiency for a learning target, so that's proficient. And a score of 2.0 would be the directly taught information that's foundational to 3.0 content. And then a score of 4.0 involves application of that 3.0 content in some way. Embedding learning targets into proficiency scales will help teachers better articulate to students what their performance should look like. And it also allows students to create their own personal learning goals. According to Marzano, teachers often equate content with standards, but yet the standards are simply too big and would take too long for teachers to teach all of them well. Proficiency scales help in the unpacking of standards and provide a tool for teachers to create power standards that focus on important content. Individual teachers could not possibly unpack all the standards on their own. This task would be better addressed at the district level with teacher input. Therefore, professional development would be set aside to allow teachers and district curriculum personnel to collaboratively create proficiency scales for each subject area at each grade level. Once those proficiency scales are created, the next step would be to track student progress. This is a powerful way to use proficiency scales as it shows them where students are in relation to learning targets. Teachers can use both formative and summative assessments to chart student progress. The key here is that teachers share performance with the students, and then they chart that progress either individually or as a class. Finally, and this is my favorite, we must acknowledge and celebrate student growth. This might include verbal feedback or individual acknowledgement, either publicly or privately. But we must not miss the importance of this simple element because celebrating student success helps to promote a positive classroom environment and it gives students a sense of pride for their accomplishments. Our district's equity vision and mission statement states that learners will thrive in a safe, equitable, and respectful learning environment that fosters confidence, excellence, and a sense of belonging while honoring differences. Acknowledging and celebrating student growth advances that vision. The second design area we will focus on is to utilize strategies that appear in all types of lessons under the category of content. This design area views learning as a constructive process, and it asks students to articulate and update their knowledge of content. According to Marzano, there are 3 types of lessons that teachers might use. They include direct instruction lessons, practicing and deepening lessons, and knowledge application lessons. There are 8 planning questions that teachers can ask when using research-based strategies that appear in all of those lesson types. They are, how will I help students preview content? How will I highlight critical information? How will I help students review content? How will I help students revise knowledge? How will I help students reflect on their learning? How will I use purposeful homework? How will I help students elaborate on information? And then how will I organize students to interact? This is also from Marzano's work. Now, these different strategies would not necessarily appear in every lesson, but they could be covered over a period of time and throughout various lesson types. Flexibility is the key. Marzano asserts that the integrating of new knowledge with the old knowledge and then revisiting that knowledge accordingly is almost non-existent in K-12 instruction. This is certainly true for our district. You know, our literacy instruction for the past 7 years has centered around a basal-based program, and we told teachers to follow that program with fidelity. And therefore, teachers did. They plowed through content. They gave very little time to make additions and corrections as students processed new content. And there was missing pieces in that. Using strategies that appear in all types of lessons will help move us toward more meaningful content instruction that gives students more opportunities to revise and reflect on their learning. The final design area that we will focus on is to build relationships with students. This is under the category of context. When students feel safe and welcomed, they are more likely to learn. There are 3 elements that are important to building effective relationships according to Marzano. These include using verbal and nonverbal behaviors that indicate affection for students, understanding students' backgrounds and interests, and displaying objectivity and control. Of these 3 elements, understanding students' backgrounds and interests is especially important considering our diverse population of students. As I mentioned earlier, over the past 18 years, our student population has shifted significantly. Currently, 55.4% of our students are students of color, and over 74 languages other than English are spoken at home. So it's imperative that our district continue to prepare staff to be culturally responsive and competent. Roseville's already doing really great work in this area because we've created a system-wide culturally responsive and competent teaching, or CRCT, professional development plan, which provides teachers with that consistent system-wide culturally responsive practices. So our continued CRCT work and emphasis in this design area will help our staff teach students from different cultures and build relationships with their families. Continued professional development will emphasize personal and interpersonal awareness and sensitivity, cultural knowledge, and cross-cultural teaching. The design areas of providing clear learning goals, using strategies for all lesson types, and building relationships directly align with Roseville's core values of equity, responsibility, integrity. According to Killian, the most powerful strategy school systems have at their disposal to improve teacher effectiveness is professional development. Roseville will need to utilize practical and impactful professional development strategies. Reeves states that high-impact professional learning includes these three characteristics: focus on student learning, rigorous measurement of adult decisions, and a focus on people and practices, not programs. As I mentioned before, for the past 7 years, our elementary school teachers have taught from a Basel-based reading curriculum. And a lot of our professional learning centered around implementing that program, which was Literacy by Design. And our message to teachers was, teach this with fidelity, do not stray from the curriculum. And though I believe our intentions were good, our professional development plan seemed to focus more on how to teach that program rather than focus on student learning and understanding. Our new professional development plan will concentrate on a few key priorities, and it will be directly linked to student results. Reeves asserts that student results must be analyzed one student and one classroom at a time. In our effort to provide high-impact professional learning, we will help teachers analyze their individual data and make instructional decisions based on that learning. High-impact professional learning is not just related to student results. Professional practices must also be examined. Teacher leaders should be identified and their work should be examined to find out what they're doing to advance student achievement. Teacher fidelity and buy-in are also important to this process because Reeves states that deep implementation is essential for an effect on student results. But instead of telling teachers what they should do or providing them with a laundry list of to-dos as we've done in the past, our goal is to meaningfully engage them in this work. According to the National Association of Secondary School Principals, professional development should be collaborative, relevant, job-embedded, and collegial. With that in mind, our professional learning plan will involve teachers. It'll be directly applicable to classrooms and provide teachers with the resources and tools they need to be successful. Therefore, in an effort to create high-quality professional learning in Roseville, we will perform a comprehensive needs assessment and examine literacy data to show trends and identify specific literacy needs, set PD goals based on what we find, identify then a professional learning focus, engage in high-quality professional learning, implement the learning, analyze the results, and then monitor and adjust as needed. And of course, all of our professional development will directly align with our district's equity vision. Our previous superintendent, John Tyne, used to say, keep the main thing the main thing. For us, that means equity in all we do. Our professional learning will continue to prepare all staff to be culturally responsive and competent in an effort to improve the learning for students of color. Reeves says, we know what effective professional learning looks like. It is intensive and sustained. It is directly relevant to the needs of teachers and students, and it provides opportunities for application, practice, reflection, and reinforcement. According to Killian, current teachers must receive extensive professional development on the Common Core standards, curricular materials, and strategies on teaching these standards that now require students to delve deeper and develop critical thinking and analytical skills that previous standards did not adequately address. The first stage of our curriculum design process began by asking the question, what do we want students to be able to know and do? Therefore, the first step in our professional development plan will be to help teachers unpack the English Language Arts ELA Common Core standards, and then help them identify 6 or fewer essential standards. So identifying these power standards is going to help advance our curriculum design of providing clear learning goals for students. We will identify no more than 6 essential standards in each of the 5 strands, as according to Reeves, there is an inverse relationship between the number of priorities that leaders pursue and their long-term effectiveness. When determining power standards in literacy, the following criteria will be used. We will look at leverage, endurance, and essential for the next level. Leverage means identifying standards that are appropriate to multiple disciplines and other grade levels. Endurance means standards that have a long-lasting relevance, such as the standard of identifying main idea and details. And then standards that are essential for moving up to the next grade level. Teachers will then meet with the grade level above and the grade level below them to share with their identified power standards. This is going to enable teachers to know where students have come from and where they are headed. And then these power standards should be revisited yearly to determine if any changes should be made. This will be the catalyst that guides our professional learning, because identifying power standards will help us set goals and identify our professional learning focus. The next step in our professional learning plan is to perform a comprehensive needs assessment of our literacy program and examine the current literacy trends of our district. The goal will be to design a plan that provides research-based strategies to increase student achievement. The National Association of Secondary School Principals provides us with an excellent framework for professional development in the area of literacy. So as we move forward in our goal to provide high-impact professional development, we will begin by creating a literacy team. This leadership team will consist of both teachers, administrators, and district leadership and other stakeholders, and their primary goal will be to determine the professional needs of teachers, ensure that our curriculum is aligned to the ELA standards and our district's equity goals, and help establish specific and measurable goals to help improve literacy. Then we will implement a literacy coach model. There are many literacy leaders in our district, and those literacy leaders can help coach other teachers by helping to provide high-quality, research-based literacy learning. And they can also go into classrooms and help model highly effective strategies. We will also conduct a literacy walk. We'll identify what we're already doing well and identify professional development needs for future learning. Then we'll provide resources for professional learning. These will be high-impact, research-based strategies that stem from identified power standards. Then we'll monitor the assessment data. This includes our use of formative assessment system for teachers, or our FAST data, and then other formative and summative assessments. This is a continuous process, and teachers will also utilize PLC time to debrief and discuss student data and make instructional decisions based on that data. According to the National Association of Secondary School Principals, reading difficulties usually stem not from a lack of foundation in phonics, but rather from a lack of comprehension strategies, inadequate vocabulary development, insufficient prior knowledge, poor reading fluency, and little to no motivation to read. Roseville already has a really well-developed plan to address reading interventions for our most struggling students. K-6 students are assessed using that formative assessment, FAST. Student scores are compared to a set of benchmarks, and then grade level teams meet with interventionists and they determine how to place students based on need. And then teachers and interventionists progress monitor students each week using a 1-minute assessment. These interventions that are in place provide solid research-based strategies in phonemic awareness, phonics, and fluency. Therefore, future professional development plans need to include a focus on comprehension strategies and vocabulary development. The Common Core state standards for English language arts and literacy were designed to prepare students for college and career readiness by the time they graduate from high school. These standards require our students to think critically, be able to collaborate with others, and problem solve. So Roseville Area Schools has developed actionable steps that they can take to ensure a full implementation of these standards in literacy. As emphasized in our professional development plan, our first actionable step will be to establish our learning goals and then help teachers unpack those ELA Common Core standards to identify clear concepts and skills and determine what the standards are really asking students to know and be able to do. According to Killian, many teachers do not feel adequately prepared to teach the Common Core standards. And she also asserts that implementing the standards cannot simply mean informing teachers about what the designers of the standards intended. As I've said before, unpacking the standards will lead to deeper learning and understandings for students, and it will create clarity in what priorities we need to focus on as we determine the power standards that meet the criteria discussed before of leverage, endurance, and essential for the next level. Another way that we will establish learning goals is to complete a comprehensive needs assessment. Again, we'll examine literacy data and identify specific needs for our district. We'll create a succinct list of power standards, examine what's being done in classrooms, and identify gaps in our current literacy curriculum. We'll also construct common assessments aligned to standards and create professional SMART goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. This comprehensive needs assessment will be the guide for our next steps because it will help establish how we allocate resources, structure literacy instruction throughout the teaching day, and it'll also guide our PLC collaborative learning. We'll then implement a plan of high-quality, evidence-based instructional strategies that most likely will focus on comprehension and vocabulary development. Roseville will move away from a program-based curriculum model to a more meaningful content instruction. This means that our elementary literacy framework will take on a more balanced literacy approach. This approach is designed to foster a gradual release of responsibility from teachers to students, and it's been found to be positively associated with reading achievement. Balanced literacy is not a program. It's an approach that combines the best practices of understanding by design and differentiated instruction that was outlined earlier by Tomlinson and McTeague, because it emphasizes ways of teaching for student understanding and meeting the needs of all students. Roseville's literacy leadership team will help to ensure curriculum is aligned to standards, and they'll also help lead professional development. Our professional development will target the 3 design areas of providing clear learning goals, utilizing strategies that appear in all types of lessons, and building positive relationships with students. And then literacy coaches will be essential in helping to model highly effective literacy strategies for teachers and to help address site-specific problems that may arise because our sites are so different. Finally, we will monitor student achievement using MCA test scores and other formative assessment data. MCA scores will be analyzed yearly, and sites will use this data to create school improvement plans that are specific to their identified areas of need. Though we will maintain our district focus of clear learning goals, strategies that appear in all types of lessons, and positive relationship building, schools will have some autonomy on what this will actually look like at each of their sites. Formative assessments that are aligned to standards will also be used at each trimester to help focus and guide both individualized instruction and future professional development plans and our collaborative work in PLCs. We will also keep our current literacy intervention protocols in place and use FAST data to continue to collect FAST data 4 times throughout the school year. And teachers and interventionists will continue to monitor students each week. Literacy walks will occur once a month at each of our sites. The purpose of these walks is to identify what is going well, and then we'll bring those discoveries to the bi-monthly, larger grade level meetings that we already have in place. These walks and the discussions that follow are meant to be organic as teachers can celebrate their successes And then literacy leaders. Roseville's overarching commitment to equity and success for all students is the cornerstone for this work as we aim to close the achievement gap. We must commit to using research-based curriculum instructional strategies, meeting the needs of our diverse community, providing ongoing job-embedded professional development, continually assessing student performance, and providing a rigorous, challenging, and enriched learning environment for all students. Curriculum design and literacy has not been done for over 7 years when we adopted literacy by design. Our focus has been program-based rather than focused on student learning and achievement. It is time to provide our students with the evidence-based educational practices they deserve so they may attain the highest levels of achievement. Thank you for your time this evening.